Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain and welcome to the DCOM review. The last DCOM we took a look at from the year 2016 seemed like an exercise in over-marketing more than anything else, but the swap didn't exactly get the same treatment, and for that reason, it sort of snuck up on me with its premiere. The last time a DCOM premiered in October, the end result was pretty solid. So, can the swap turn a coincidence into a trend? Well, let's find out. Spoiler warnings now, you all know the drill. With all that said, let's take a closer look at the swap. We start things off with a musical montage of all things before we're introduced to our lead characters. First, Jack, portrayed by Jacob Bertrand, who some of you might know as Kirby Buckets from the show of the same name. He's a hockey player looking to make varsity, as well as a literal list of other goals he hopes to achieve. And then we have Peyton List, who, depending on your opinion of this show, will either encourage or discourage your viewing of this particular film. She plays Ellie, a rhythmic dancer whose team is on the verge of being demoted to club level via budget cuts, unless they can win their upcoming competition. When the two leads get back to their home lives, you can immediately see how their perspectives diverge. Jack has a very disciplined coach as a father, along with two older brothers that love roughhousing. Ellie, on the other hand, lives with a more energetic parent who's always looking to do things for her and with her. You'll notice, however, that both characters are short one parent, a point that will only rise in narrative value as the plot progresses. In addition to that, their school lives aren't exactly ideal for different reasons. Jack gets harassed by a behemoth of a bully for reasons barely explained, and Ellie's best friend essentially dumped her for a new girl named Aspen because coolness trumps all, I guess. So they both end up in the nurse's office for bruised feelings more than anything else, and then we get the namesake of the film as the swap happens, via a series of text messages. Based on some pseudo-spiritual nonsense that Ellie's mother was talking about a few scenes before, Disney Channel, this was not an accomplishment. Please don't try to top it. But that having been said, I'll explain later why this mechanic works a little better here comparatively speaking. So, now Ellie is Jack and Jack is Ellie. Shall we say freaky predicament, which comes complete with all the place-swapping cliches you could all see coming from a mile away. This all stems from a text conversation they had about who has it easier between boys and girls, which is certainly an interesting question to pose, even though it doesn't really have a clear answer. But I think this movie kind of understands that. So with the whole body switch happening and not being able to figure a way out of their current conundrum, they're forced to betray each other, which starts off as a bit challenging to follow since this movie's pace is a fairly frenetic one at this point, but it gets easier because as a viewer, you get used to it, and as actors, Peyton and Jacob both get progressively better at portraying Jack and Ellie respectively as the film went along. So this leads to a kind of resolution of Porter, the bully from before, as well as more drama with Ellie's best friend Sassy, who assumes through Aspen that Jack, who is now Ellie, has a thing for Ellie, who is now Jack, and I'm already so done with that plot point. Then we get more body swap hijinks as the leads pretend to be each other for most of the movie, and some of those moments are pretty funny. Also, it might be a minor detail, but I honestly don't think it should be dismissed out of hand. I really liked how much respect Jake paid to a body that wasn't his. So many other movies in this very specific film type wouldn't pay that any mind except for a quick, easy, and uninspired anatomy joke, but I really like the perspective Jake had here. So things start to get tense when the pair realize that time is running out because Ellie's mom got her a new phone and her old plan is running out on Sunday. Alright, pretty convenient, but if they can make each other's lives better somehow, then they figure they'll be able to return to their original bodies. So Ellie is trying and failing to make varsity hockey, while Jack is trying and failing to be a dancer. But in the middle of all of that commotion are a few key emotional points. We learn about Ellie's father and how she left in addition to learning about Jack's mother having passed away. One of the things this movie does well is continue to ramp up the importance of and the focus placed on those points as the plot progresses, and if you've seen the entire film, you know exactly why, but we'll get there. So the story continues on, leaving our leads with just a single day to fix everything, but Ellie and Jack are both doing a bit better for themselves. Ellie's learning how to be one of the boys in a strict household, as well as sorting things out with Porter in a nice way, and Jack is connecting with Ellie's mother, a connection that we know he hasn't felt for a long time. This leads into two separate parties that the leads attend. I did enjoy how they used those venues to explore more gender norms and how different perspectives might view them, but I can't shake the feeling that some of it was a bit too general. And maybe to make the point clear, that's what the minds behind this film decided to do. But just as far as supporting characters go, nobody save Porter and Jack's brothers to a lesser extent are given too much nuance to work with, and the only potentially interesting supporting female character, regrettably, isn't given too much to do or say. This leads to a gender standoff of sorts on the bridge, since Jack, as a man in a girl's body, is still terrible at explaining himself. So Sassy assumes the worst, but Sassy gets called out for being a terrible friend, and a fight is teased at, but nothing comes of it before the coach intervenes. This leads to maybe the best scene in the movie, where once again, the actions of our leads are paralleled in a way that allows one to understand the other beyond their gender, beyond the company they keep, and even beyond the roughness of their own situations. They learn the most important thing you can about a person, what drives them, what informs their perspectives as people, as well as the people they lost along the way. I love how it's filmed, I love what it expresses both with and without dialogue, and I even really like the song they picked for this scene. It really fits. This then leads to a scene where the leads are learning how to properly perform the other sport overnight, which is questionable, even by the standards of a movie where body swapping is possible, and here's why. The reason that Ellie is Jack and vice versa involves mind transfer, but if you transfer the entire mind, then motor skills have to follow, unless only parts of the mind are transferred. Now, I'm no neurologist, but it would seem reasonable to assume that Ellie learning hockey in Jack's body, or Jack learning dancing in Ellie's body, would be relatively implausible, especially overnight, and made even more implausible by the fact that they both perform well the next day, despite not having any sleep the night before. It's one of those we won despite our disadvantaged plot points that the film didn't really need, because what it does next is far more important. We learn why there's a time limit on getting things back to normal, and it's because Ellie's dad, who failed to show up for the competition, has a new family, and wanted to officially sever ties with his old one by dumping his old cell phone plan. Now, this moment could have been comically overdramatic, but the reason it works is because of who Ellie is as a character and why she holds onto that flip phone in the year 2016. She does it because it allows her to feel closer to her absentee father despite all he's put her and her mother through. Then we get two more well-performed parallel scenes with Jack and Ellie both realizing what and how they truly feel about their current state of being. Jack needed to be trapped in another body to realize that letting feelings in was not just okay, but healthy, and Ellie needed to be trapped in another body to realize that letting go is the only way to keep moving forward. This is what the swap is truly all about, which is why in the aftermath of that, Ellie and Jack switch back. But their parents also learn a valuable lesson from this ordeal too. Ellie's mother also had to learn to let go, since losing her husband was the direct cause of wanting to live too much of her life through her daughter. And Jack's dad also had to learn that he was the cause of a lot of the pain Jack was holding back on. And being able to love and feel are important aspects of not just the male psyche, but humanity. And so, the movie concludes with Jack and Ellie remaining good friends, and even texting about their parents and their cringeworthy flirting, before realizing that their phones are magic or something, so texting this stuff is probably a bad idea. And now, the characters. As I mentioned, there's not too much in the way of interesting supporting characters. They're mostly there to say a few lines or play a very specific part, but I did enjoy the parts several of them had to play, despite not being overly engaged by Sassy, Aspen, or any of the drama they caused. I kind of liked Porter as a character, who's beyond awkward most of the time, but I think it fits into the at times overly awkward tone that this movie embraces before it hits the more important points. And I also thought it was clever to use him to weave Devin Dakota's character into the narrative as a way for Ellie to eventually move on from her old best friend. And even more so than those two characters, I really enjoyed Jack's brothers, Stryker and Gunner. I think the way they relate to Jack and serve as an intermediate between him and their overly critical father was very well done. And even when the father is afraid to love, the brothers aren't as much, and you can always tell here, more than most DCOMs, that there is a legitimate bond among the three. The parents here are fairly standard in their rules. Again, they had a role to play, a job to do, and they pretty much did that. Neither had a particularly special performance compared to other better DCOM moms and dads, but neither of them really needed to, since the emphasis was on the leads. But all things considered, I think that even though a lot of the supporting cast wasn't terribly inventive in character design, I enjoyed more of them than I didn't. Talking about the leads might get a little weird given the whole body swap thing, but we'll make it through. Peyton List, just like Debbie Ryan before her, proves here that she can bring it as an actress if the material is good enough. Her ability to portray the character of Jack for most of the movie was a bit easier to pull off versus what Jacob Bertrand needed to do, but it works here because of the methodical way it allows Jack to not just understand his own feelings better, but use his own perspective to shed light on the drama that Ellie was going through before and after the swap occurred. Peyton as an actress uses expressions and actions to great effect here, which can at times be overt and silly, but other times really capture something powerful. And the way she pilots through both the gender norms that are addressed okay and the family ties that really make this movie what it is, all work here. She was really good here. In fact, a fair bit better than I came in expecting. And if you're a fan of hers, you'll probably like her performance. Jacob Bertrand is an actor I had never seen before because I have yet to watch anything he's in, save this movie, but his performance as Ellie kept getting better and better as the movie went along, and because Jacob as an actor had to portray a girl inside a boy's body, he was asked to be at the center of many of the more emotionally laden points of screenplay. It was a challenging role, and I don't know if I'd call it one of the better lead portrayals, but to me, it was clear that he was up for that challenge, and did some great things in the role. The way he worked through a lot of the social interactions, both with peers and family most importantly, all delivered here, and they really had to, because being able to properly express yourself, especially given what this movie slowly reveals itself to be about, is exceptionally valuable. At the end of the day, both leads really succeed in these roles, not just because their acting was solid, but because of how deep the movie goes into both Ellie and Jack as people. We learn so much about them over the course of this film, in addition to the fact that they both go through such incredible and important change. Lemonade Mouth this movie is not, but the way they work through the arcs of two characters here isn't too far removed from the captivating character work in that film. And that's the swap. So, what's the verdict? Somehow, someway, defying every expectation I had coming into this one, this film is simply very good. Not perfect and probably not great either, but does enough right with its concept and themes to more than make up for what it lacks in other areas. Let's start off with the stuff that doesn't work. The Zapta comparison has probably been done to death at this point, so we'll just leave it at that. But the mechanics are still very silly here. However, the reason I stated earlier that it works a little better is because the focus is more on the mystical side. That doesn't automatically make it plausible or any more engaging, but it does allow the film to avoid being blatantly broken. Also, since this mechanic is only ever used as a means of switching bodies and then switching back, there's not too many inconsistencies with its use beyond the motor memory point that I mentioned before. And because there was a certain point the characters had to reach to switch back, there's no real internal logic problems with the quest element. In short, they did the best they could with an inherently faulty plot device. The writing also isn't too great and borders on really bad at some points. The cliches are everywhere, and even if you've never seen a body swap movie, you could basically set your watch to when they'll make the next odd remark that's meant to be funny because body swap, but for the most part, falls awkwardly flat. Speaking of awkward, the way much of the early screenplay is framed and the way much of the early dialogue is delivered makes the film hard to get into initially, but it does ramp up. And as I mentioned, I do feel like they could have gotten more out of the gender aspects of this film with more attention paid to the minor characters, but since this movie strives for something even grander, it gets a bit of a pass for that. On the flip side, the things that work about this film are everywhere. The main characters are filled with depth and fully fleshed out as well as properly developed. Instead of using cell phones as only an inane plot device, as too many movies do, it's actually used as symbolism for the character of Ellie not being able to let go of her father and having just as much trouble letting go of her best friend because both relationships are intertwined. In addition, the bedazzled phone Jack is settled with used to be his mother's, so it's inherently valuable even without the added context. Instead of just having a boys don't cry narrative where a boy learns to properly emote and feels better, the movie properly digs into why Jack's father has instilled this mentality, and that's why this movie isn't as much about gender roles as it is about healthy emotional expression. Being rigid isn't framed as an exclusively guy thing, even though it is somewhat framed as such because that's a very general male perspective, but the point is, it's more framed as a coping mechanism for hiding pain instead of dealing with it, which is something both parents and both leads experience. Ellie is also using her best friend as a coping mechanism for not wanting to let go of her decidedly better past, in addition to the flip phone symbolism. Both characters have to embrace the fact that the past happened. Ellie's dad has moved on. Jack's mom has passed away. There's no changing that, but they can change how they respond to that, so they no longer need to feel trapped by it. This movie, through the awkwardness, through the cheesiness, through a couple of missed chances to be even better, is a really good movie because it pushes the narrative beyond perspectives and genders and moves into the plane of overcoming great loss, and along the way, uses perspectives and gender as a means to that end instead of using either one as the end itself. I think we still could have had just as viable a movie with more focus on gender, but I also think that the move to focus more on relationships with parents, both present and lost parents, was much more ambitious, and I always encourage ambition in DCOMs. All in all, this is a DCOM that deserves to be experienced. For almost a year, I've been telling Disney Channel to take more chances with their programming, and this movie felt like a solid compromise. It gave you the silly, arguably too much, but it also delivered on the bigger moments. It gave you some cliches, again arguably too much, but it also gave you leads with depth and nuance, the likes of which we almost never see. It really felt about something instead of just going through the motions for an hour and a half. It made me laugh on those handful of instances where the humor works. It made me think deeper about the aspects of my life that I'd have trouble letting go of. And, most vitally, it made me feel for the characters and their plight. And yes, a tear or two was shed. Forget what the first looks told you. Forget what the trailer made you think. It was all a clever cover-up for the true intentions of this movie. And if you can get through the first 15 to 20 minutes, then the film starts to slowly reveal its true colors. And guess what, guys? Its true colors are beautiful. But, as I often say, the only way to know for sure is to give it a watch and decide for yourself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, throw it on a like, sub for more, and share it everywhere. And don't forget to follow Disney Brain on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Links down below. The coming days will bring a surprise video that I really wanted to make, and maybe the next Girl Meets World review, but it's World of Terror, so maybe not. Also, I'm setting up a Twitter poll to help determine which DCOM review is next. So, head over there and vote on what's to come. Until then...